We're back in another Sound the Battle Cry, and the name of the message today is Nephilim at the Miami Mall, the formation of Discordian hyperreality utilizing ARGs and Shills. Now, a lot of you might be going, I have no idea what any of that means. This sounds totally insane, but don't worry, I'm going to explain it to you. Now, this might sound like sensationalism, but it's actually not. It's the opposite of that. Now, this story about Nephilim at the mall, yes, there is a lot of sensationalism going on with that, but I'm going to explain that in detail. And just want to say a couple things before we start. You know, if you're new to listening to me, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I do not fill my videos with fluff. I give you facts. I give you very important information. In fact, it's hard for me to cut out some of the important information and to keep it, as short as possible. But we cover everything that we need to. Very important information. But it's not sensationalism. It's not exaggerated. I back everything that I say up with facts. And I prove it to you and I show you where you can go to study it even more yourself. Okay? But what I see here, the reason we're talking about this today is that there was a story that happened recently. And, so I'm going to play a video that shows this. Is one of the most popular videos related to the story. If you haven't heard about this, a lot of you probably have. But there was this incident where something happened at a mall in Miami. There was a lot of police officers showed up, way more than I've ever seen at any place for, whatever they were responding to. No one even knew. Then they came out and said, oh, it was kids fighting or whatever. Then all the speculation started about creatures there and all these different types of things. So I'm going to play a clip where someone's talking about that. But listen, this whole message is not, I just want to say this right now, this whole message is not going to be focusing on this story. What I'm going to be talking about is a much bigger concept and a much deeper, idea about people's perceptions being twisted and the blending of reality and fiction. And I'm going to take you on a journey where you're going to learn about a lot of different things, including a lot of things you probably have never heard of in your life. And by the way, I didn't just discover these things. I've known about these things for many years, but now is an important time to bring this out and to talk about it. Okay? So I'm just letting you know, we're not just going to be talking about the story. We're using this story as a launching point to talk about a wide variety of very interesting subjects that are directly related to you, and they are affecting society at a deeper level than you could possibly imagine, and they have been for decades. Okay, so please watch this all the way to the end. All right, so now we're going to go to this story here. So one of the most popular videos that spread around, it was posted on TikTok, but then it was also posted on X by this account called Dr. Keck. And what was going on in Miami Creatures. So the lady's video, her account is Auntie Coolette. And this lady, she does make a lot of sensational videos. But her video on this subject got on X 13 million views, like 48, almost 50,000 likes, all these reposts, right? It went everywhere, went viral. And then there were a number of other videos talking about this story. It was everywhere, saturating, X, Twitter for days. And probably TikTok as well, all over the place. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this video, and then we're going to stop it and we're going to talk about it, okay? Just to show you what happened here.
We're just goofing around. All things stated here are purely speculation. Just having fun. You are going to want to see this because there is a very good chance, at least for the next few days, you will not see this anywhere else but right here. And if I'm being completely honest...
Well, first of all, that was not true because it was seen in many, many different accounts I saw this story posted about all over the world. So that's not true.
I'm not sure what part of this story bugs me most. The fact that we actually now live in a world where something like this could happen. The fact that we actually live in a world where something like this could happen. But at this point, none of us will even be shocked. or the fact that something like this could happen in our world. And not a single news media has broke this story, not at all. In fact, if you Google search it, it is quite a difficult find, which is all that much more suspicious with a story of this kind of size, this magnitude. And yet, here we are. Hang on to your britches. It's gonna get real. A couple of days in Miami, Florida, at a mall, the local police were dispatched to the mall for an argument, a fight that broke out between juveniles. Juveniles, they say, had sticks and fireworks. Oh my. But ultimately, the call, what they claim was the call, the reason for the police officers to arrive at the scene, was due to a fight that had broken out between juveniles who had sticks and fireworks. But Auntie, why do you care if that's on the news? That isn't a big deal. No, my friend, no, it's not. It is definitely not that big of a deal. I agree with you, and it is definitely, hands down, not a big enough deal for the local Miami Police Department to show up on the scene just like this. Right? That seems like a lot of officers to show.
Now, I just want to make it clear that I absolutely agree that there is a disproportionate response from the police officers than makes sense for supposedly responding to teenagers fighting. Obviously, there was something going on that seemed pretty shady, but that doesn't mean we jump to crazy conclusions, which you're going to see here in a second here.
But my friends, that is not anywhere near all that came. And once you understand and you hear the eyewitnesses' stories, I believe you will at that point understand a little bit better as to why so many police officers, probably 100, along with choppers, black choppers from the PD, patrolling the scene from above. And according to witnesses, eyewitnesses there, the Miami police was not dispatched there for a juvenile fight. And the obvious need for such an enormous police presence was far more sinister than what we've been told.
Far more sinister.
As multiple witnesses claimed to have seen, I can't believe I'm going to say this, creatures that stood 8 to 10 feet tall, walking.
Oh, creatures! Now we hear it. There were creatures in the mall? Giant creatures? Oh, I can't believe it.
Outside and even inside of the mall. And the pew-pews that were reported, and even the pew-pews you might hear in some of the videos, had nothing to do with the juvenile fight. According to these witnesses, it was actually the mall-goers shooting to protect themselves from these 8 to 10 foot tall creatures in self-defense.
Cue the dramatic music. Next on the episode of Aliens at the Mall.
Yeah, no, that's why I came right here.
But wait, it gets better. Along with the ridiculously high number of police officers that...
Which, once again, I agree. That was a ridiculous amount of police there. Okay? But it doesn't mean it was because there were giants in the mall.
Arrived on the scene and the helicopter flying above. Apparently after this incident was phoned into the police, the Black PD helicopters were the only things flying that night in the Miami sky. As the Miami airport was shut down. Still no flights going or coming at Miami International, only one PD helicopter patrolling the area. The absolute lack of this story anywhere is absolutely driving me mad. On my
Not true.
Google search, I found nothing.
It's everywhere. It is everywhere now. Okay? And so, you know, everyone's like, oh, it's all being deleted off the internet. This is what I love about this when people say this in alternative media, people that question the mainstream media. They go, oh, yeah, it's not being reported anywhere. And now it's everywhere. Millions and millions of views. It's all over all social media platforms. Oh, it's being suppressed. No, it isn't. If it was, then we wouldn't see anything about this. You know, you wouldn't see anything about this, but we see it everywhere. Because, you know, one of the most tempting things, one of the biggest things that makes people want to look at a story is when you say it's being suppressed. Okay, this is Streisand effect. All right, so that's enough of that video. And let me just make one comment about that. Many people's discernment quote unquote, is just to believe anything that is said to be information they don't want you to know. Okay? So this is what I want to point out. So first of all, the comment I just made. Now, I don't believe you should trust anything the mainstream media says, the corporate media, however you want to say it, at all. Anything they say, the government says, whatever, yes, you should question all of that. A lot of times they lie a lot. They definitely lie. Okay, great. We understand that. Now, a lot of times, alternative media has reported the truth and exposed the lies of mainstream media. Okay, I accept that as well. But the thing where a lot of people get into trouble is they don't understand how much disinformation and lies are in the alternative media, which is now, much more chaotic and confusing with all of the independent accounts. It's not just a few alternative media channels. It's all these random X accounts and YouTube channels that are, saying that they're reporting things that no one else does and exposing things. But a lot of times they pass on false information mixed in with the truth, which discredits the truth, and it discredits you when you repeat it. And some of these people don't know what they're doing. They're useful idiots and they're just passing things along. But some people do, and they are 100% shills who know that they're pushing disinformation to mislead people. Because controlled opposition is the best way to get people off track and to get them away from the truth. Is to provide people the heroes and the supposed leaders and the supposed people that they want to listen to, is to provide them with those, making them people think that, oh, these are people I can trust because they go against the mainstream narrative. All the while they're controlled. Okay, now that's one point. But here's the bigger picture. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next section after this. But the big point is here, we have no footage, still have no footage of 8 to 10, 12-foot creatures in the mall, Nephilim, giants, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter what your belief is about that, okay? Some people believe in the Nephilim thing with fallen angels and humans. Some don't. I don't think that's a thing where we need to, you call each other evil whether you believe or don't believe in that. It doesn't matter. What the point is that, is there evidence for this? Is there video footage? And there is not. Okay? Now trust me, I've looked. And I've seen people show shadows in videos. I saw someone move around the video footage back and forth, and it's showing a statue, but it changes angles, so they're trying to say it looks like a giant walking. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. There's no clear footage showing this. Now, why am I harping on this so much? Because the point is, there's no proof of it. There's no evidence. And yet it was so easy for this to be spread around and people spreading this sensational story and information around as if there was any truth to it. And the reason we're talking about this today is I'm showing you that how easy it is to deceive people and how easy it is going to be to deceive the masses. Now you might think, oh yeah, I know, Pete, the masses can be deceived. Yes, but you understand that, but I don't think that you understand the level of deception that can be perpetuated on people that they will fall for. And I don't think you understand the history of what has been done that's been going on this whole time all around you, and you might not even be aware of these things. And you might not be aware of where it's going, where it is leading people, how it is altering their perception of reality. It's being distorted. And that leads me to the next point. Now we're going to launch off into what I'm going to discuss today, which is hyperreality. Now, hyperreality I'm going to read a couple sections from the wiki file on hyperreality just because it gives a quick overview on it. It's a good, accurate, brief description of what hyperreality is. So let's look at that. Hyperreality is a concept in post-structuralism that refers to the process of the evolution of notions of reality, leading to a cultural state of confusion between signs and symbols invented to stand in for reality and direct perceptions of consensus reality. Stay with me. Hyperreality is seen as a condition in which, because of the compression of perceptions of reality in culture and media, what is generally regarded as real and what is understood as fiction are seamlessly blended together in experiences so that there is no longer any clear distinction between where one ends and the other begins. Okay? And that is exactly where we are headed. We are headed for hyperreality, where our entire world is being changed into hyperreality. Okay? And they start with small sections of groups of people in society, and then it grows into bigger groups, until it's society, a countries all over the world, until everyone is sucked into this hyperreality, which is made possible through the advent of technology, especially the internet. And now we have they're pushing the limits of artificial intelligence, deep fakes, fake video, deep fake audio, and that is all going to continue to distort to aid and help in the creation of hyperreality. So you no longer have a distinction between what is real and what is fiction. Hyperreality is the inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from a simulation of reality, especially in technologically advanced societies. Are you paying attention? There is a strong link between media and the impact that the presence of hyperreality has on its viewers. This has shown to blur the lines between artificial realities and reality. Through what? Through media, through technology, influencing the day-to-day experiences of those exposed to it. As hyperreality captures the inability to distinguish reality from a simulation of reality, common media outlets such as news, social media platforms, radio, and television contribute to this misconception of true reality. Exactly. Okay? All of these things that they listed, the news, social media, TV, video games, anything like that, they all contribute to people's misconception of reality. It alters their perception of reality. No matter what you think, you might think, no, that doesn't change my perception of reality. You are wrong. You are wrong. You cannot engage with all these forms of media unscathed unless you are extremely, extremely diligent in critically analyzing and testing every single thing that you are exposed to, and you are careful even what you expose yourself to and the influences that you allow to come into your life from all these media. Descriptions of the impact of hyperreality can be found in popular media. They present themselves as becoming blended with reality, which influences the experience of life and truth for its viewers. Baudrillard, similar to Roland Barthes, explained that these impacts have direct effect on younger generations who idolize the heroes, characters, or influencers found on these platforms. Exactly. And these are the new celebrities in the social media age, all the influencers. As media is a social institution that shapes and develops its members within society, the exposure to hyperreality found within these platforms present an everlasting effect. By the way, Baudrillard, he was coined, is said to be the one that coined this term hyperreality, just to let you know. Baudrillard concludes that exposure to hyperreality over time will lead from the conservative perspective of the institutions themselves to confusion and chaos. That's the goal. I've been talking about this for a long time. That is the goal, chaos. Leading towards the destruction of identity, originality, and character, while ironically still being the mainstay of the institutions. Okay, that is very significant. That exposure to hyperreality will, over time, cause confusion and chaos, will destroy identity and originality, and of course, blur the lines of reality and fiction. It changes society. I think this is the last paragraph. The hyperreality created on social media platforms has been regarded as strong and influential enough for its quality and emotion to be translated into social reality, where value is lost and careers are damaged. Emotions expressed in social media are directly having real-life effects on numerous sectors despite having any factual basis or tangible information. As social media becomes more ingrained into the daily lives of countless individuals, the distinction between stories on the internet and truth in real life are becoming more blurred as it descends into the core of hyperreality. And so that's what social media does. It is destroying people's perception of truth and reality. And let me just check here. This is absolutely the last paragraph, okay? And then we're going to move on to something else. The increase in social media influencers has given rise to a popular storytelling trend where creators recount past experiences, often exaggerating. They definitely exaggerate on social media, and dramatizing the experience for perceived importance and relevance, also known as lying. They will lie about their experiences. The trend mixes reality with the virtual world, as viewers often feel part of the creator's life and identify with this given image the creator produces for their audience, right? People can present a completely fabricated persona for social media that doesn't exist in real life. That's not even who they are at all. I just watched a video the other day, and these people were talking about RV life or something, and they said that they had come in contact with some other full-time RV YouTubers, and they said a bunch of them, didn't even use the equipment that they promoted. They didn't even like it, and then they ended up abandoning it. Like, they just lie. They just lie about it to get views, and then as soon as the sponsors started drying up, they moved on to something else. But they're not even really into what they're promoting. It's fake. Okay? And social media currently offers what news and other sources of media could not 40 years ago: the chance to not only share news, but also create news. To exaggerate this even further, TikTok has seen the nuance of AI accounts. Oh yeah, now we have that too. We have AI accounts that present themselves as human-like animated beings with unique personalities, artificial social circles, and personal likes and interests. They came out with some AI girlfriend that all these young kids can interact with. You have an AI girlfriend or boyfriend here, where it's a computer, and you're pretending that you have a social relationship with a computer. Once designed by humans, now completely independent of any influence, these AI creations have mass followings that present conditions of perfect four-dimensional simulation as described by Baudrillard. With the incentive for viewership and notoriety, look at the incentive, social media influencers / creators have little incentive to produce meaningful and actual news, and instead lean toward these storytelling methods that produce large reactions that blur the lines of reality and false online narratives. Okay, and that is a crucial point I want to hammer on right now. See what they just said? These people, these influencers, they do not have an incentive to tell the truth. They don't care about the truth. The only thing that matters to them is how many views am I going to get? How viral can I make this? They don't consider whether what they're saying is true or not. They don't care about that. And this includes the alternative media. They say, well, as long as it goes against what the mainstream media is saying, then I'll push it out there. I'm not going to verify the facts. I'm not going to check it. I'm not going to make sure that it's true. I'm just going to put it out there. As soon as I hear something or I put something together, just going to put it out there. And then when anyone disproves me, still not going to take it down. I'm just going to leave it up so I can continue to get more views. And guess what? Millions of people will continue to follow those people, even though they've been caught red-handed putting out fake information, making fake predictions, being wrong over and over again. People still follow them for some reason. I guess they like being scammed. They like being deceived because they continue to follow these shills, these disinformation agents, these controlled oppositions over and over and over again. And they are completely detached from reality. Okay? That ship has sailed. They're leaving reality and they're going right into hyperreality. We're already there for a lot of people. I'm already telling you, this isn't something that's way off in the future. We are already in a place where many thousands of people, maybe millions, are living in hyperreality right now because of social media and technology. That is exactly where they're at. They are not living in reality. And this isn't going to stop. It's not going to reverse. It's only going to accelerate. That's what's going to happen. Now, you have some control over this yourself if you listen to what I am telling you today, if you heed my warning. But if you don't, then you're just going to get sucked into all manner of different crazy things. You're just going to go get sucked right in. And by the way, this isn't the end of it. It's going to get even way crazier. Way, way, way crazier. All right, so that's an explanation of hyperreality. So now that you understand that, we can move on to explaining how some of the methods that have been used in the past to create hyperreality. Okay? All right, so now what we're going to look at is alternate reality games, blurring the line between fantasy and reality. And that's what I meant in the title when I said ARGs, that's alternate reality games. Now, this is very important for you to understand when it comes to this subject, okay? Because these alternate reality games have affected society at a deeper level than you would imagine. And I'm going to show you there's more to it than you would think. There's more behind it than you may even understand. Okay? So, what we're going to look at here, we're going to bounce around from this article here. Now, like I said, I've already known about a lot of this stuff for many years, but this is just a good article of someone that wrote about this. Their blog is called VisUp, and they wrote this article called The Game. And they talked a lot about these things. They did a pretty good job with that, but I'm also going to branch off and talk about some other things as well. But anyways, let's look at this blog a little bit. VisUp, The Game. I'm going to read a few things from here. In the pivotal year of 2012, the enigmatic Cicada 3301 was launched. Okay, now this was an alternate reality game, just in case you didn't know. It all started with a series of puzzles left on the infamous 4chan on January 4th of that year. A fresh round would appear on the same day in 2013 and 2014. The puzzles were allegedly designed to locate highly intelligent individuals. Initially, they largely centered around data security, cryptography, steganography, and internet anonymity. But over time, they became more fixated on the occult, incorporating elements such as Freemasonry, Crowley, runes, and even the highly esoteric work of William Blake. This thread reached an apex with the launch of a tie-in book, Liber Primus, which appears to be something between a code book and a grimoire. Okay, so that's just one example. I'm going to show you some other examples of these alternate reality games. Gives you some of the details with that. But Cicada 3301, that was a big one. Now, Cicada 3301 became a global phenomenon shortly after its launch and still continues to fascinate despite it being 6 years since the last puzzle dropped. In 2019, Great Big Story, a subsidiary of CNN, dropped a very slick documentary on the cicada phenomena called Cracking the Code of Cicada 3301. It followed a group of cicada fans who still struggle with the ciphers years after much of the rest of the world moved on. The documentary attempts to link the group behind Cicada 3301 to the early 90s cypherpunks behind the famed mailing list that originated at UC Berkeley. It's all a way to train brilliant individuals to techniques to protect their digital privy while enabling many of these loners to finally find true friends in the process. Okay, so I want you to see one thing, focus on one thing here. It said that it followed a group of cicada fans who struggled with the ciphers years after much of rest of the world moved on. Now, why did they have such a hard time moving on? Because what happens with these alternate reality games is reality starts to fade away and the fiction starts to become more real. And that's why they have a very hard time stepping outside of that world once they're in it and once they're immersed in it. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. That's the Cinderella version anyway. The reality looks far more ominous by the day. Less than 3 weeks before the election, the arch globalist mouthpiece known as the Financial Times dropped a bombshell. They said QAnon was an outgrowth of Cicada 3301. Okay, I'm going to stop right here because I know anybody who's been into Q or studied that, I understand what you're going to say. There's no such thing as QAnon. There's Q and then there's Anons. They're two different things. Q is the one who posts and Anons are the people that follow it and, they break down codes and they do their posts. I understand that. That's just what the mainstream media calls it. They always say QAnon, but I understand it's called Q and the Anons are separate. I understand that. But anyways, they say the thesis was that Q was an outgrowth of Cicada 3301. 3 days later, Heavy joined in on the fun. Okay. Now, there's a lot about Q. I believe some of that is true 100%. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But one thing that is absolutely true, I can tell you right now, is that a lot of people connected to the Q movement were also from intelligence. Now, this is what Q people like to say. They like to say, well, yeah, because these are all white hats. These are all good guys that were in the deep state, but now they're fighting against it. But the problem is there are a lot of times where, again, it's a mixing of truth and fiction. Do I believe that there are elite satanic pedophiles all around the world? Yes. And in positions of power? Yes. Are they covering all that stuff up? Yes. But what I'm trying to tell you is this is part of the cover-up. You understand that? Part of the cover-up is disinformation and controlled opposition, so that when you speak some things that are true and we expose things, and talk about things like Epstein or Jimmy Savile or, the Hampstead or other things like that, these evil things that happened, and they're absolutely proven. Once you talk about those things, but then you mix in false information, failed predictions, which Q has posted 100% for a fact, posted things that were going to happen and they did not happen multiple times. So don't try to tell me that I don't know. I know. I have read the posts myself. Okay? And many other things associated with that. And the problem becomes every sensational thing that is posted, all these followers of Q, the majority of them, just, repost it without checking it at all. If it's supposedly exposing satanic pedophiles and anything in any type of conspiracy, they'll just repeat it, they'll post it, they won't test it at all, they won't check the facts, they'll just post it everywhere. Oh, we're helping. You're not helping. You are hurting it. You are hurting the exposure because you have no credibility. And you are destroying and eroding away any credibility that any of you had by the day. More and more and more. Every time you repost unsubstantiated claims. And then you repost things that are proven to be hoaxes, proven to be false, and then you don't care and you continue to do it over and over and over again. That's hurting, not helping. Let's continue. Their claims were incredible. That a man named Thomas Schoenberger had taken over Cicada 3301. I know all about that guy, so you don't have to tell me. By 2014, and that he had later set up the Q phenomena. Further, Schoenberger was linked to a slew of former U.S. intelligence officers. That, definitely. They included Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, VIPs, members William Binney, who is ex-NSA, Robert David Steele, ex-CIA. Even more curious are his supposed ties to General Michael Flynn, the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, and Trump's first national security advisor. Okay. Of course, Flynn served in the latter capacity for less than a month before he was forced to resign in the midst of the scandal. His subsequent legal odyssey could fill an entire blog alone. Okay, now, so Michael Flynn, definitely connected to this Q movement, one of the biggest players in this game. And he even posted that one time they would, people that were following Q would post the 3 stars in their profile. He did that. He posted the oath or whatever for the digital soldier, all these things. I saw him do all these things. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't trust someone who was the former head of the DIA, because I know all about the DIA and what they've been involved in from the beginning. I don't trust them at all, and I've seen some very shady behavior, and when you put the whole picture together, it doesn't look good. And so I'm trying to get you to please question these things. Okay? And again, I'm not denying the existence of conspiracies, of satanic pedophiles, or anything like that. Okay? I'm not denying any of those things whatsoever. So, we know that these things exist. But again, part of the issue is to get people, to discredit people speaking the truth. You're sowing confusion, disinformation, detaching people from reality. And the fact is that the whole Q movement absolutely has a lot of similarities to alternate reality games. So let's talk about alternate reality games for a second. I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs from here. And then we're going to launch off, and I'm going to show you an example of one of the most famous alternate reality games, and you're gonna see a lot here. All right, so alternate reality game, an ARG. Alternate reality game is an interactive networked narrative that uses the real world as a platform and employs transmedia storytelling to deliver a story that may be altered by players' ideas or actions. So transmedia storytelling, that's just when you use different mediums to tell a story. Like instead of just one, like instead of just using radio, you also use television, maybe, Xerox copies of things, and you leave them in random places and use many different mediums to deliver the story. The form is defined by intense player involvement with a story that takes place in real time and evolves according to the player's responses. It is shaped by characters that are actively controlled by the game's designers as opposed to being controlled by an AI as in a computer or console video game. Players interact directly with characters in the game, solve plot-based challenges and puzzles, and collaborate as a community to analyze the story and coordinate real-life and online activities. ARGs generally use multimedia, such as telephone, mail, but rely on the internet as the central binding medium. ARGs tend to be free to play with costs absorbed either through supporting products or through promotional relationships with existing products. Yeah, a lot of times, movies, video games, they've done, I'm going to show you examples of that, where they promoted movies that were coming out or albums by releasing ARGs. And, for example, I Love Bees was a promotion for Halo 2, and The Lost Experience and Find 815 promoted the television show Lost. Pay-to-play models exist as well. Later games in the genre have shown an increasing amount of experimentation with new models and subgenres. Now, this stuff goes deep. But anyways, that's just a basic explanation. But I want you to see one more thing from this wiki file. So it is really interesting when you get into the unique terminology, especially. There's a great deal of debate surrounding the characteristics, how it should be defined, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, forget that. Who cares? Let's go to the unique terminology. Some of the terms essential for understanding discussions about ARGs are puppet master. Okay, listen to these terms. It's just pretty wild. Puppet master. A puppet master, or PM, is an individual involved in designing and or running an ARG. Puppet masters are simultaneously allies and adversaries to the player base, creating obstacles and providing resources for overcoming them in the course of telling the game's story. Puppet masters generally remain behind the curtain while a game is running. The real identity of puppet masters may or may not be known ahead of time. Okay, so puppet master, the man behind the curtain, you getting the symbolism here? This is the handler. That's really what this is. The curtain drawing from the phrase, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, there it is generally a metaphor for the separation between the puppet masters and the players. This can take the traditional form of absolute secrecy regarding the puppet master's identities and involvement with the production, or refer merely to the convention that puppet masters do not communicate directly with players through the game, interacting instead through the characters and the game's design. Okay, so there has to be this, this level of separation between the puppet master and the people playing the game through this curtain, or else it doesn't have the same effect as an alternate reality game. Rabbit hole, here's another term, rabbit hole or a trailhead. A rabbit hole, you notice how a lot of people who are in the truth movement use these terms, down the rabbit hole, all these things. It's not a coincidence. Rabbit hole. A rabbit hole or trailhead marks the first media artifact, be it a website, contact, or puzzle that draws in players. Most ARGs employ a number of trailheads in several media to maximize the probability of people discovering the game. Typically, the rabbit hole is a website, the most easily updated, cost-effective option. Okay, so that's the rabbit hole. Once they open that, it just keeps going and going, and they get sucked into it. And then one more term, which is TINAG. This is not a game. Setting the ARG form apart from other games is the "this is not a game" sentiment popularized by the players themselves. It is the belief that one of the main goals of the ARG is to deny and disguise the fact that it is even a game of at all. Okay, and that's so important because that really messes with people's heads. Even if they know it's a game, when they say this is not a game, to not everyone, but okay, I'm not saying this happens to everyone, but over time it does affect people's perception, especially younger people. Okay, this especially will affect younger people and other people with certain predispositions mentally. When it says this is not a game, that is going to affect their perception of reality. Okay, so that's very important as well. So just wanted a brief overview and some of those terms, which I thought were very interesting. Quick fact here, ARGs were influenced by this book called The Magus by John Fowles. I'm just going to read a quick paragraph about this. The Magus is a 1965 it came out, is a postmodern novel by British author John Fowles, telling the story of Nicholas Earth, a young British graduate who is teaching English on a small Greek island. Earth becomes embroiled in the psychological illusions of a master trickster, which becomes increasingly dark and serious. And if you read the plot summary about that, you can see all the games that were played with this person to mess with their head. Now, this was said to influence alternate reality games. So what influenced alternate reality games? Someone who was a trickster messing with someone's head with psychological illusions, which became dark and serious. Now, for more on that subject, please see my message, The Role of Tricksters as Agents of Chaos, Bringing Destruction to the Old Order, and you will find a lot more on that subject. All right, so what we're going to look at now is the first well-known ARG, which is called Ong's Hat. And this article from Gizmodo actually gives a pretty good breakdown about this alternate reality game. Ong's Hat, the early internet conspiracy game that got too real. There's going to be some pretty interesting stuff in here, and this is where you're going to see it gets next level when it comes to the ARGs. Okay, let's look at it. On a sunny morning in early 2000, Joseph Matheny, remember that name, woke up to find a conspiracy theorist camped out on his lawn again. He was making coffee when he noticed a face peering in a ground floor window of a small 3-story building he rented in Santa Cruz. Past the peeper, there were 3 other men in their early 20s loitering awkwardly. Matheny sighed and stepped outside. He already knew what they wanted. They wanted to know the truth about Ong's Hat. They wanted the secret to interdimensional travel. Now, think about this. This is right at the beginning. These people who are waiting outside this man's house, their reality was so deeply affected that they were outside of this man's house, the guy who created Ong's Hat, this ARG, because they were so desperate to get answers to this game. Just think about that. They were not looking for trouble, just information, and he was able to get them to leave with some cryptic comments and a quick lecture on personal boundaries. But Matheny, a mobile game developer who said he spent the 90s working for some of tech's biggest names, had been on edge since about a year earlier, when he had to march on an unruly intruder off the property at gunpoint after an attempted break-in. This is how crazy people were getting. According to Matheny, he and his girlfriend at the time had been receiving threatening phone calls and emails. Someone was anonymously contacting his employers, claiming Matheny was dangerous, a liability. After more than a decade of secrets, the chickens were coming home to roost. The Ong's Hat experiment had grown out of his control. And that's what can happen once these games are created. Once these ARGs are created, they can get to a point where the original creator has no control over where they go, and people just run wild with it. That's what happens. Ong's Hat is one of the internet's earliest conspiracy theories, but before that, it was a place, a ruin almost 3,000 miles away from Santa Cruz, deep in the woods of New Jersey's Pine Barrens. Rumors swirled for years that something profound had once happened there, a confluence of mad science and the paranormal that had warped reality itself, opening a door into strange, unfathomable worlds. The Legend of Ong's Hat. Covering more than 1 million acres of largely unspoiled primordial forest, the Pine Barrens feel impossibly dense and vast, a wild and lonely place where sandy trails wind past mysterious lichen and rare flora. Like the gnarly pygmy pitch pine. Once home to shipbuilding, coal mining, and bog iron trades, the area's industries declined over a century ago, and the pinelands are now dotted with the remains of abandoned towns and rotting factories. Often referred to as a ghost town, it's not clear how much of a town Ong's Hat ever was. Local lore attacks the unusual name to Jacob Ong, a 17th century settler who legend has it angrily threw his hat into a tree after a lover's quarrel. Some Ong family descendants say the name was once Ong's hut, and it was only ever one or two buildings. Henry Charlton Beck, who depicted historical Ong's hat as a rowdy, boozy outpost in his 1936 book Forgotten Towns of Southern New Jersey, later recanted his descriptions, saying he'd fallen for elaborate traps set by locals to mislead him about the town's past. Whatever it once was, Ong's hat had since been completely swallowed by the forest, though the name stubbornly pops up on maps and lives on in the nearby Ong's Hat Road. None of that is why there was a crew of nosy young men on Matheny's lawn that day in 2000, or why Ong's Hat has become a site of pilgrimage for fans of supernatural. There's another legend, and it goes briefly like this. According to a pamphlet that began popping up in the late 80s, Ong's Hat, a gateway to the dimensions, a full-color brochure for the Institute of Chaos Studies and Moorish Science Ashram, Ong's Hat was once home to secret experiments led by the Dobbs twins, a pair of Princeton scientists who'd been forced to build a secret lab out in the Pine Barrens after their work in chaos studies got them booted from the academy. Nearby, a mystic scholar and carpet salesman named Wali Fard had established the ragtag Moorish science ashram, and over time the scientists and spiritual seekers met and began to merge their pursuits, blending meditation, physics, alchemy, and metaphysical disciplines like remote viewing in never-before-seen ways. According to the brochure, which included detailed technical descriptions of the scientific activities and day-to-day life at the ashram, the spiritual rhythms permeating the place proved ideal. The group thrived, living in a scattering of weather-gray shacks, Airstream trailers, recycled chicken coops, and mail-order yurts. As its experiments grew increasingly bizarre and esoteric, in an effort to train the powers of the mind to manipulate the quantum underpinnings of reality itself. Finally, after some years, they produced the egg, a pod that could actually pierce the veil between parallel universes, enabling travel to other dimensions. Okay, so this is all the story that is included with this Ong's Hat game. But even as the ashram made great strides with its unorthodox work, danger was brewing. A nuclear accident at a nearby military base threatened the residents with radiation poisoning. Authorities began to take an interest in the spooky action taking place in the woods. Eventually, the egg technology was used to transport the entire ashram, piece by piece, to a parallel Earth where human life had never developed, leaving behind only a single structure to house the gateway itself. The brochure concluded by inviting readers to travel to Ong's Hat and locate the trans-dimensional community, though it warned you might discover that finding it is not so simple. Other versions of the Ong's Hat story that later showed up online were supposedly told by survivors who'd grown up at the ashram, and included accounts of a violent raid on the compound by government agents tasked with destroying the gate and the egg technology. Even later takes on the legend say the building around the gateway has decayed away, but the vortex is still there, swallowing the occasional errant hiker or unlucky squirrel. Scratch below the surface and you'll find cryptic references to Ong's Hat posted in bits and scraps since the earliest days of the commercial internet. Details of the story were strange but true, like a weapons-grade plutonium spill in New Jersey, which was covered up for years. Jersey locals described military exercises related to the nearby Fort Dix, which lined up suspiciously with the claim of a brutal raid on the Institute for Chaos Studies compound. And anyone looking into the brochure for the Institute, long passed around in online conspiracy circles, would find it listed in a rare book catalog called Incunabula, which first showed up around 1990. Okay? The catalog was supposedly compiled by someone named Emery Cranston, whose introduction claimed its collected works, examined together, revealed a secret scientific history of parallel universe exploration. Along with the brochure, Incunabula listed other colorful books and publications, some seemingly untraceable and odd, other editions of otherwise accessible tracts on science, meditation, Sufi mysticism, and the occult, which seemed to substantiate some of the legend's oddest bits. One would find it impossible to track down, say, a copy of Phlogiston and the Quantum Aether by Dr. Kamadev Sohrawardy, which the catalog describes as reconciling Everett Wheeler's many worlds and the other worlds of Sufism, Tantric Hinduism, and Vajrayana Buddhism. On the other hand, James Gleick's Chaos Making a New Science was a Pulitzer Prize finalist in 1987, and the catalog included several works by prominent physicist Nick Herbert, like Quantum Reality Beyond the New Physics, Faster Than Light, Superluminous Loopholes in Physics, which deals with the possibility of time travel. In fact, there seemed to be a direct line between Herbert's research and the Ong's Hat story. Herbert was a member of the boundary-smashing fundamental physics groups in Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, a group of scientists tasked with pushing the limits of the possible through quantum experimentation in the 1970s. According to the MIT's David Kaiser in his 2011 book, How the Hippies Saved Physics, the group's serious yet playful forays into offbeat ideas like telepathy and contacting the dead led to controversy and attention, and from these battles, quantum information science was born. So I just want to say that, all this is going to prepare you to give you the background for showing you how people's perceptions were altered. So you understand the whole background. And by the way, I'm just telling you about one ARG. This is just one. There are many out there, many that have affected people in history. But I'm showing you how much effort went into developing this story to make it very detailed and very realistic for people. And then you're going to see, coming up real soon, how people were affected. Aside from his more famous work, Incunabula listed what it claimed were uncorrected galleys of a book by Herbert called Alternate Dimensions, which the catalog says were suppressed by Harper and Row, and constituted the most accurate and thorough informed work on travel between worlds in our entire collection. Writings on his personal site about a concept he called quantum tantra, Herbert described discovering a door and connected shamanistic concepts with modern physics, using some of the exact same language used to describe his work in the Incunabula. Herbert outlined the concept of quantum tantra and his dream of new physics in an interview with Scientific American last year. In the 90s and early 2000s, seekers looking into the legend online began to believe, check this out, that just reading about Ong's Hat was starting to affect them. People reported various synchronicities, strange dreams, unusual visual perceptions, and shifts in reality monitoring, wrote Michael Kinsella, a professor at Central Michigan University Mount Pleasant and author of Legend Tripping Online, Supernatural Folklore, and the Search for Ong's Hat, in an email. That's where people were reporting that their perception was changing and they were having shifts in reality. If you were into science fiction or the paranormal, you'd eventually butt up against Ong's Hat, said David Metcalf, who runs social media for the University of Georgia Business School and edits Threshold Journey of Interdisciplinary Consciousness Studies. Now, threshold is a very interesting word to use. But anyways, when he discovered Ong's Hat as a teen in the late 90s, said Metcalf, it was popping up on chat boards and message boards. It would bleed into your life. See that? The blurring. Unlike the Jersey Devil or other Baron's horrors, this was no ordinary urban legend. Shaped over years of teen campfire retellings in the woods, rather, the Ong's Hat story, the Incunabula catalog, and the rest of the surrealistic sci-fi pretzel were manufactured by Matheny and his friends. Like Herbert, over more than a decade, starting with photocopied pamphlets in the 80s and bolstered with fake documents, radio show appearances, and other hijinks. But the exercise in collective storytelling made its deepest impression online, amassing a following of internet detectives who filled page after page on web forums and personal blog sites with research and theories about what really happened at Ong's Hat. Okay, so like I said, you see how much effort they put into making this as real as possible? The detail that they put into this? Fake documents they manufactured, leaving them places, radio show appearances. They put in a lot of effort to suck people into this. The experience of stumbling across Ong's Hat rabbit hole was weird, says Metcalf. You kind of knew it was some kind of game, but there was this level of question that was left open. Now watch what happened. At first it was all in good fun, said Matheny, a mind-expanding in-joke for goths, kids, stoner gamers, and sci-fi loving computer nerds who like talking about physics and telling spooky stories. Nobody knew exactly what was going on or where the tale originated from, though most readers also didn't believe there was really an ashram or a cadre of rogue scientists in the New Jersey woods. Matheny posed as a kind of investigator whose research would turn up new twists and chapters. But as the lore and literature around Ong's Hat grew, more people started to actually take it seriously, some of whom had poor boundaries and struggled to separate fact from fiction. Did you hear it? Struggled to separate fact from fiction. When harassment caused Matheny to finally pull the plug on the experiment, some followers refused to believe it was all a hoax. There are still people that think it's real, said Metcalf. Still people that think it's real. Okay? And this is the distortion of perception that I am talking about. And one of the first ARGs absolutely messed with people's heads and was bringing them out of reality into hyper reality. Okay, so now this is where it's going to get a little bit more wild. This section of the article is called Chaos Magic, and that's very appropriate title. The first iteration of the Ong's Hat story, the Institute of Chaos Studies brochure, appeared in a magazine called Edge Detector in 1988. Okay, so this happened all the way back in 88. The story was attributed to anarchist writer Peter Lamborn Wilson, a.k.a. Hakim Bey, who had become a student of Sufism after extensive travel through the Muslim world and a stint as a journalist in Tehran. Wilson claimed he didn't actually author the Edge Detector, Ong's Hat article, but had found it and was now merely passing it along, though he would later officially take credit for writing the piece in his 2016 book, False Documents. Writer Michael Muhammad Knight, once a disciple of Wilson's, explains the Ong's Hat story's origins in his 2012 book, William S. Burroughs versus the Quran. The book described Knight's disillusionment over his former mentor's past endorsements of pedo stuff, which do not appear to have influenced Ong's Hat story. That's what they say. So very crazy connections here with the beginning of this story, the Ong's Hat story. But William S. Burroughs is very important, by the way, to all this history. Knight explained how details of the Ong's Hat tale were drawn from Wilson's life. The backstory of Wally Fard, the Moorish Science Ashram founder, for example, was a mix of Wilson's own biography and that of Nation of Islam founder Wallace D. Fard. Emery Cranston, the fictional compiler of Incunabula, took his first name from Wilson's father and his last name from a journalist who worked for Wilson in Tehran. Wilson and Matheny were both friends with Nick Herbert, who'd inspired the story's scientific ingredients. And in 1989, they, along with others in their social circle, started reproducing and passing around Xeroxed copies of the Edge Detector article, leaving it in coffee shops, concert venues, and anywhere else some curious person might find it. So think about that. They just take this fake story and they leave it in all these random places, coffee shops and concerts. Someone picks that up and they think it's real. Fans of the era's mail art and zine cultures, they started offering the brochure through the mail, utilizing services and catalogs that would then distribute the pamphlet to fans of UFO newsletters and paranormal fare. Soon after, they produced the Incunabula catalog with collage artist James Coneline, after which Matheny says he and Herbert started really going crazy with the project. And yeah, we're going to talk about some pretty crazy stuff here. So at the time, Matheny was a punk with an interest in computers and an old school hacker ethos who'd come to California from Chicago and immediately fallen in with a mostly much older crowd of Bay Area weirdos, intellectuals, and scientists that included Herbert. I was cocky because I was hanging around Silicon Valley and watching people come out of garages and do things that were told were insane, said Matheny. He described how he'd become enamored of zany irony religion Church of the Subgenius and his forebears like Discordianism, a complex parody cult that mixed true and fictional events to create bizarre alternative histories. Now, don't even get me started on Discordians and Church of Subgenius, but I will be talking about Discordians a little bit more, and I put that in the title because first of all, we see right here, it just said that Matheny, who created Ong's Hat, the alternate reality game, looking like the first big one, he was enamored with Discordians. Okay, because Church of Subgenius is basically Discordians anyway, so you just call it Discordians. Okay, that is very important, and I will show you why later. I will include that in this teaching, okay? He experimented with psychedelic drugs and ritual magic. Okay, so the guy who made the alternate reality game experimented with psychedelic drugs and ritual magic. Okay, we're not talking about pulling a rabbit out of a hat. We're talking about the occult. Developing a particular interest in figures who practice both science and the occult, like rocketry pioneer Jack Parsons, who, by the way, Jack Parsons, if you didn't know, was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, and he did black magic rituals with L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology, also a disciple of Aleister Crowley, and they did a ritual together called the Babylon Working. Matheny developed an edgy sunglasses indoors kind of swagger, and he liked messing with people. Okay, so he developed a particular interest in people like Jack Parsons, disciple of Crowley. Okay, so this is the guy who created one of the first big ARGs. Okay, into the occult, Crowley, Discordianism. Yeah, we got it. Okay. Now, so watch what he did. In the fledgling internet, Matheny recognized a distribution platform that could reach more people than they ever could by mail. He began posting incunabula materials, first on bulletin board systems and then everywhere else he could. He developed his own character, an intrepid investigative reporter probing the story, and began interacting with anyone online willing to discuss the mysteries of Ong's hat. He used his real name and drew no particular line between his real persona and Ong's hat investigator Matheny. As Knight described it in his 2012 book, Matheny, a well-known culture jammer and friend of Peter Wilson, took the ball and ran with it, building Peter's short story into an elaborate conspiracy hoax. Online, Ong's hat became The Matheny Show, and he began thickening the plot. He posted interviews with Ong's hat survivors, totally fake, and set up email addresses for characters like Emery Cranston, fake person, the fictional compiler of the Incunabula catalog, who would converse cryptically with anyone looking for answers. New pieces to the puzzle emerged, like an in-character interview with Nick Herbert titled Advances in Skin Science, which was published in a 1993 issue of Boing Boing. In 1995, Matheny set up incunabula.org to house his complete research. Followers of the story started referring to themselves as eggheads after the ashram's trans-dimensional pods. And, the article was talking about how, if people wanted to figure out that it was fake, they could. But after years of never publicly breaking character, people started to believe anyway. And at first, Matheny encouraged them. Here's where things started to get irresponsible. To spread the narrative, this is the next level stuff. To spread the narrative, Matheny fostered relationships with more serious conspiracy believers who didn't share his own postmodern detached approach to the realms of the weird. He purposely built out overlap with legends like the Montauk Project and Philadelphia Experiment, allowing the story to mutate, incorporating elements from other conspiracy pantheons, and letting posters feel like their findings were leading to breakthroughs in a real evolving investigation. I wanted to see what would happen. He knew that he was messing with people, and he knew that he was going to the next level to fool people into thinking this was real. People that believe in conspiracy stuff, he intentionally fooled them and strung them along pretty far. Okay, so that should give you pause. Because there's people out there who do that because they enjoy it. They enjoy trolling you because they think it's funny, because they think that it's, if they can deceive you and fool you, first of all, they think it's funny, but it's also proving to them that they're superior to you, if they can get you to believe this stuff. In 1999, Matheny published Ong's Hat, The Beginning, an ebook collecting the now considerable accumulation of lore, later followed by a print edition. But with other conspiracy enthusiasts posting Ong's Hat stuff, Matheny was losing his ability to frame the narrative, and by the turn of the century, he said probably half of the people engaging with Ong's Hat clearly did not know it was a game. Do you hear that? He said probably half. That's a lot of people. Even if it was half, that is a lot of people who did not know that Ong's Hat was a game. They thought it was real. They were living in hyper-reality. People had become obsessed and started demanding answers from Matheny. But the intrusions into his personal and professional lives really came to a head after a series of in-character appearances on a classic late-night paranormal program, Coast to Coast AM, which reached millions of listeners at the time. Things immediately got exponentially more intense, said Matheny, and he was beset by hardcore saucerheads, and maybe worse, ordinary-seeming people who were just confused out of their gourds. Finally, in a 2001 post addressed to the conspiracy community, Matheny ended the experiment. He wrote, Nick and I decided today to publicly announce in the near future that the Ong's Hat project has now concluded. I think we were successful in laying the groundwork for the coming change. The gateways are now open. He wrote that he'd be glad to just be himself again, adding, P.S. This is not a joke. Okay, so he tried to end it, right? Matheny tried to say, okay, we're done. And think about this. This was going on all the way back in the 80s, and he doesn't end it until 2001. That's how long this stuff went on for. Now, not everyone was totally convinced. Quote, it doesn't matter if it's a game or not a game, said Peter Moon, a prolific writer on paranormal subjects like the Montauk Project, who runs the Long Island-based Sky Books, which publishes an edition of Matheny's book, Ong's Hat, The Beginning. Dude, Peter Moon is absolute garbage. I've known about him for a long time. I found his books. What's the one I used to have? The Music of Time. It's a bunch of trash, disinformation. Of course he's going to defend it. It doesn't matter if it's real. If it's a game or not a game. Yes, it does matter. Anyways, he shrugged off Matheny's reveal. The two are still on good terms. There are different levels of assimilation of what the phenomena is, he said. Moon conceded that in its most basic form, Ong's Hat is a legend, but he still believes something otherworldly took place in the New Jersey woods all those years ago. That series of documents, the Incunabula papers, those do exist. That's probably the most core thing, okay? So, just ridiculous. After his sign-off, most of the community wished Matheny well. Some were mildly disappointed in the abrupt exit, but wanted to keep the game going without him. There were also those who took it badly. People were angry, said Metcalf. They didn't believe him. They didn't even think he was a part of it. Metcalf said the strike toward the end of the Ong's Hat saga came from people who felt lied to or just didn't want their magic stolen. Upending people's sense of reality, he said, made them violently paranoid. Completely upending their sense of reality, because their sense of reality, that just shows to what level their sense of reality was changed. They were so sucked into this fake game. They no longer could tell what was real anymore. All right, so this is the last section we're going to cover, this article, and then we got some other stuff we got to cover. Really important stuff, because believe it or not, it's going to get crazier. Going to get crazier, totally. Alternate realities. According to a 2005 book, This Is Not a Game, A Guide to Alternate Reality Gaming, the Ong's Hat Project could arguably be called the first alternate reality game, or ARG, an immersive experience that sends players on a fiction-based quest set against the backdrop of the real world. Participants in an ARG might interact with real places and people as part of the game, like, for example, traveling to a particular location to find a hidden node or pick up a ringing phone, as well as characters invented by the game's creators. Even knowing it's a game, the thrill comes from not knowing where the game ends and the real world begins. In the ARG, new clues and story developments will often respond to the actions of the players, who must compare notes and work together to solve puzzles. But what really gives ARGs their reality-warping magic is the lack of any stated rules or terms of engagement, other than players should never admit they're playing a game. The term ARG wasn't yet popular when Matheny started posting Ong's Hat material. He just called it a living book experiment at the time. The way I used to describe this was, it's like a role-playing game, but the board is not a table, it's the world, he said. Okay, so now that you know all about Ong's Hat, one of the first most well-known ARGs, and we talked about the creator of Ong's Hat, Joseph Matheny. We're going to learn a little bit more about Joseph Matheny and some things that he said and people he's connected to and these types of things, because this is going to give us a little bit more background, a little bit more understanding, because there is more going on here than you think, okay? Because I think you can understand by now how ARGs can affect people's perception of reality, how some people just totally don't even understand that it's not real, and they start to live in hyperreality. You can understand that. But is there more to the story? And what are the intentions of these people doing these games? Is it just because they get a kick out of it? They just like to do a game? Is that all that's behind it? Just some random dude doing it? Is that what's behind it? Because I'm here to tell you today, there's more behind it than that. There's absolutely more behind it than that, and I'm going to show you. So what we're going to look at here is quickly look at an answer that he gives to this interview, which is, you can find this on the Wayback Machine, Joseph Matheny. And then after that, I'm going to show you some connections he has to people in real life he has had. And then I'm going to show you an explanation of who those people really are. And that should really blow your mind as to really what's going on behind this. So it's all going to make sense after we're done. Okay, so let's get into it. So this is from an interview from some publication. I guess it's called New World Disorder. And he asked him about the Angshat Project. Now I want you to pay attention to his answer. Who better to abduct and probe for information about the Angshat mystery than Joseph Matheny, the author of the only book, Angshat, the beginning on the subject? New World Disorder asks, for our readers who may not know about it, could you give an overview of the Angshat mystery and how you got involved and interested in it? Okay, so listen to his answer carefully. Joseph Matheny. The Incunabula catalog is a culture jam created by culture jammers. There is no group that existed previous to 1987, at least not as described in the brochure. 4 people got together in the 80s and 90s and put those documents together. None preceded their existence. However, many legends and synchronicities have occurred since. That is beautiful and indicative of a responsive universe. One was an artist who made beautiful, moving, otherworldly collages and pictures. One was a poetic terrorist who could weave words together with an unparalleled passion and vigor. Another was a media and network hacker who could make the media pay attention to a bingo match in Poughkeepsie if he wanted to. One was a physicist with lots of friends in the dancing Wu-Li master circles and wonderfully twisted sense of inappropriate humor. They decided one day to take some pre-existing fiction bits, stir in some current pop science parody of paranormal conspiracy literature, and graffiti it on the walls of the new sphere. Boys will be boys, after all. Over the years, others in certain academic circles were brought in to work on updating and upgrading the concepts employed and to integrate the lesson learned into other projects, some of which are currently underway. 3 of them, the latter 3, made a verbal pact. And their pact was, never let it be used to start a cult, never let it be used as a platform to hurt anyone who gave blood, sweat, and tears to make it realized, and if a channel became available that made it more accessible to more people and money was involved, always give the money away to charity. When and if at all it becomes too much to manage, toss it in the public domain via a free game or something like that. It fell to the 3rd to complete the mission. This was called Stage 3, done. And so, a teeth-grinding obsession for a pathetic few and fun run for an intelligent and vast majority was born. I was lucky enough to be a rather conspicuous fly in the wall to a lot of this. So it comes down to 2 camps. One, the majority view as what it was meant to be, a joke that should have flamed out a few years ago. This majority includes the creators who, in an attempt to get through to those that clearly have missed the obvious, put out the heretical Inc. 5 and 6 in a collaborative effort to re-inject some levity into the situation. If you have missed the point that it is a joke, you have missed the point. Another, a vocal and persistent minority that will resort to any low-road tactic they deem necessary to preserve the fundamentalist view in an effort to perpetuate a cockeyed religion based on something that was intended to be the polar opposite of such, even when being repeatedly told this point blank. Some elements of this cadre of believers resort to elaborate schemes of deceit and denial. Believers will be believers after all. The other answer, cue spooky music. Now, what I want you to pay attention to this answer is, when he says this next answer, he is acting as if he is simply trolling, just joking around, kind of playing into this whole game thing. But if you listen to his answer, this is what Discordians do, by the way. Okay, I just have to say that right now. I know we haven't even discussed Discordians yet, but this is what they do. They love, first of all, when you don't know if they're serious or not, you don't know if they're lying or telling the truth. And that's why a lot of times they say, false things. They joke around a lot. So then anything they talk about, they can actually say the truth and no one take it seriously. And it's also a great way to discredit the truth. And so when he says this next thing, he wants everyone to think, oh, this is just part of the joke. But if you listen to what he's saying, it's pretty interesting. Okay, so let's read his answer. The other answer, when MK Ultra was exposed, they had to resort to other means to secure budgets. Think Iran-Contra and Air America. They also had to subcontract most of their projects out to third parties, but under black budget cloaks to keep them alive but hidden. Think 2,000 toilet seats for bombers, or 2 million there. But anyways, it means an overpriced amount for, something that shouldn't be that expensive. One of those contracts was handed to a group of cultural engineers. Okay, hold on a second here. He said cultural engineers. I want you to remember that. Let's look at something real quick. Now, the phrase cultural engineering is very important. Okay, I'm going to read you a quote here real quick and we'll get back to his answer. You really need to understand this. Because we talked about the phrase chaos magic was used earlier. We're talking about Discordians. We got to describe this, okay? So it's too much for me to explain everything right now, but I'm just going to run down this real quick. So first of all, there was a cult that started, back in the 16s called the Process Church of the Final Judgment. They used to be Scientologists, but they made some other crazy satanic cult where they worship Jehovah and Satan and Lucifer all at the same time. They did some really shady things. There's controversy about what they did and didn't do, but that's okay. That's what they are. Then, after that, there was what was called an art collective that was formed by one of the people that formed it was William Morrison, who was a member of the industrial band Skinny Puppy. Okay, and him and some other people formed this group called The Process. It was like an art collective, but it was influenced by the Process Church of Final Judgment. And he actually, after he made it, he explains on his blog that after he made this group, he got in contact with the Process Church in real life, and they still existed. He thought they didn't, but they did. And he admits that he was in contact with them. Now, why is that significant? Well, I'm going to give you a quote from him, and he's talking about another person called Genesis P. Orridge, who was also involved in that Process collective. And Genesis P. Orridge was the founder of the band Throbbing Gristle, and then they made the group called Psychic TV. And they also made an international chaos magic organization called the Temple of Psychic Youth. And they put all their tactics in a book called the Psychic Bible. Okay. And having said all that, Genesis P. Orridge also said they were really obsessed with the Process Church of Final Judgment. And they also said they were in contact with members of the Process Church, including Timothy Wiley and others. Okay, so having said all that, I said that, I had to say that to give you this quote. So this is a quote from William Morrison. Look at what he says. It was around that time that Genesis P. Orridge strolled through the front door. Jen and I had a series of long talks about the project, and I remembered one fateful afternoon when I said, I have this idea that I can only refer to as cultural engineering. He laughed and threw me his business card, which said GPO, Genesis P. Orridge, Cultural Engineer. Said by William Morrison. And I have the link there. It's it's archived, but it was from the blog Process on process.org. He talks about the beginning of this Process collective group that they made, which Genesis P. Orridge was a part of. And he said, I'm thinking about doing cultural engineering. Genesis P. Orridge says, yeah, cultural engineer. So That's significant when we're reading here that Matheny says one of those contracts was handed to a group of cultural engineers. Let's continue with his answer. Their mission? Build a better mousetrap. The results produced by this ad hoc think tank was labeled the Incunabula. The name was chosen for several reasons, one of which was its phonetic ominousness and relative obscurity in the everyday vernacular. Another was its link to mysterious texts, which the creators observed seemed to be a common obsession among certain personality types that were representative of the target demographic. Okay, so what he's saying here is they came up with this idea and they picked specific names and the specific mythology that they put in the game. They were catering towards a certain type of target demographic, certain types of personalities of people that they knew would fall for this story, especially people that were becoming deeply obsessed with a lot of conspiracy stuff. That's who they were targeting. The kernel of this conceptual operating system was a framework structure that would allow scalability in the future so that yet unseen cultural modules could be put into place within the framework, meeting trends and fads as they emerged. To put in layman's terms, it was designed to be upgraded. The goal was to create a strange attractor scenario that was so addictive that users would act like heroin junkies if faced with the prospect of being cut off. Now, is that what happened? Yes. He specifically said what really happened was when he cut off the game, he said, no, this is a joke. We're done. People were angry as if you were telling a heroin junkie, no, you're not getting any more drugs. That's exactly what it was like. And needless to say, they used the emerging medium of computer networks enhanced by a mytho-poetic connection to Xerox pamphlets to deliver the payload to the pre-selected demographic. This model has now been tested, perfected, and enhanced a bit. The latest version was delivered to JPL for social group simulator testing and then handed to off to several prominent computer game companies to utilize in upcoming console, PC, and cell phone games to be released starting this year. It is a model that is designed to be addictive, circular, which means leading nowhere while always promising to lead somewhere, and results in madness in the user after extended exposure. Does that sound familiar to some people? That these games that are designed to be addictive, circular, and resulting in madness in the user after extended exposure, they get mad. And you might say, oh no, it doesn't lead to madness. Really? Then how come, what if you get deeply, deeply involved in a game, you get really far, and then what if I just came over to your phone and I deleted it? Or you were getting really far into a game and I just threw it out the window and then you couldn't play it anymore. Now, obviously, you'd be mad at me for doing that, but how mad would you be that a fictional game you could no longer continue with? And you would notice that there is an unhealthy emotional connection. Think of it as a virtual asylum that the inmates willingly enter. You hear that? Attract, entrap, and train. What better scenario can be imagined? The elegance from a design perspective is exquisite. If the entrainment or exit strategy part of the program is unsuccessful, the entrapment mode is still in place around the subject. No need for physical asylums. Hooray, a budgetary success as well. Some say that some of the people responsible for the Stanford prison experiment were involved. Others say members of the Black Lodge were involved as well as the aviary. The aviary member in charge is known as the Crow. No reference to that name in connection to the aviary can be found, though. So see how he starts, throwing in that stuff where he's just joking around. Oh, some say this and that. But what he actually described is true. And he actually admitted that these ARGs that he was creating were the forerunner to what they're doing now with games. what they're doing with video games and cell phone games and all these things, and social media as well, because other people have admitted that. High-level people involved in the creation of social media platforms like Facebook and others, they admitted that they studied the psychology so that they would make the platforms more addictive with the dopamine feedback loops. They knew what they were doing, and he knew what he was doing as well. And he's saying what I was doing laid the groundwork for all this stuff to come later. Okay? That's exactly what he said. All right? Now, before we talk about the Discordians, I'm going to show you Joseph Matheny, Creative Ong's Hat, the ARG. I'm going to show you Matheny's connection to Discordians. If you go to Matheny's Wikipedia file, you can see his filmography, which includes The Eye in the Triangle with Robert Anton Wilson. He was the director of that. And then Matheny's discography includes Robert Anton Wilson, The Lost Studio Sessions, and then Robert Anton Wilson Remembered. Now, okay, so why is that significant? Robert Anton Wilson was a Discordian. He was one of the most important people involved in the creation of Discordianism. And it was created by Thornley. Okay, there's two guys, Thornley and another guy. I'll read that to you in a second. But Robert Anton Wilson wrote a trilogy of books called Illuminatus, and that is pretty much well accepted by everybody, that it helped to create the beliefs of the Discordians. Okay, so Robert Anton Wilson was absolutely a Discordian. He was also a member of the Church of Subgenius, which is another Discordian sect. And why is that significant? Because Matheny was directly connected to Discordians. That's why. He was so involved that he filmed this lecture with Robert Anton Wilson, because he supported and it was influenced by, he said he was enamored by Discordians. Okay, and why is that significant? I'll show you. Okay, so now what we're going to look at is an academic paper called Discordian Magic, Paganism, the Chaos Paradigm, and the Power of Imagination by Carol Cusack, University of Sydney. And this is very important to understand. You want to understand really what Discordianism is. This paper really helps to understand that, okay? This woman has studied Discordians more than anyone I've seen, and explains exactly who they are, and you're going to see as I read this why this is important and how it applies to the subject today. All right, so let's read this. Start with the abstract. Discordianism, founded in 1957 and generally regarded as a parody religion, has only recently received scholarly consideration as a valid religious expression within modern paganism. Yet ritual practice within Discordianism remains largely unexamined. Hugh Urban's brief discussion of Discordian magical workings as a subcategory of chaos magic is the extent of academic discussion of the subject to date. This article elaborates on Urban's tantalizing classification of Discordian magic. A brief history of Discordianism is sketched, then ritual and magic in the Discordian tradition is explored through an examination of key texts, including Malak Clips the Younger's Principia Discordia, that's the founding text of Discordianism, and Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy. Similarities between chaos magic and Discordianism are noted, and an analysis of the Temple of Psychic Youth, a magical order founded by the British performance artist Genesis P. Orridge and others in 1981, elucidates the relationship between chaos magic and Discordian magic. It is argued that the essential unorganized nature of chaos magic and Discordianism and the trenchant resistance of both to any form of orthodoxy justifies classifying Discordian magic as a form of chaos magic. Chaos magicians and Discordians both have a deconstructive and monistic worldview in which binary oppositions collapse into undifferentiated oneness, and neither conformity of belief nor unity of practice is required to be an authentic Discordian or chaot. Okay, so that's a basic overview of this. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you want to read more about this, you can look at this paper. But I do want to show you a little bit of who they are, the Discordians. So let's read this overview. Discordianism, founded in 1957 by Greg Hill, a.k.a. Malaclips the Younger, and Kerry Thornley, a.k.a. Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, or Lord Omar, occupies an ill-defined space in the categories of both new religion and magical tradition. Its founders explicitly stated that Discordianism began as a joke, a parody of religion, that exposed the deficiencies of mainstream churches and conformist expectations of post-war America. Cultural commentators and the Academy alike have derided it as a fake religion, and to date, serious study of Discordianism as a new religion has been minimal. With the publication of Discordianism scripture, the revolutionary zine entitled Principia Discordia, in 1965, it became clear that magic and ritual were part of the practice of Discordianism. And it talks about this turkey curse that they do, whatever. To date, only Hugh Urban has attempted to locate Discordianism in the contemporary magical spectrum. Magia Sexualis, his book, contains a brief treatment of Discordian magic as a variant of chaos magic. This article investigates Urban's preliminary categorization of Discordian magic, explicating Discordianism's place as a goddess-worshipping tradition within modern paganism. Itself a magical tradition in which ritual, spells, witchcraft, and worship are inextricably combined. And analyzing instances of Discordian magic from a range of Discordian texts, such as Principia Discordia and Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy, which is a work of science fiction, but nevertheless functions as an authoritative repository of Discordian mythology and theology. First, a brief history of Discordianism and description of its teachings are provided. Second, Discordianism is established as a legitimate modern pagan religion, and the difficulties of defining magic and religion, especially those forms of magic and religion that are inspired by fictions, are also important at this point. Third, Urban's understanding of Discordianism as a form of postmodern deconstructive chaos magic is examined and vindicated. This identification is strengthened through the application of Urban's model to magical rituals within Discordian tradition and a study of the Temple of Psychic Youth. Finally, conclusions regarding the contemporary context of both new religions and magical practices, and in particular those drawing inspiration from fiction and mediated through the internet, are drawn. So I'm just going to read one more thing about the founding of Discordians and what they're all about. So, Hill and Thornley had a vision, that they had a vision of Eris, and Eris was this goddess of chaos. And Thornley and Hill said they received a vision of Eris herself. She castigated humans for having lost all knowledge of her and for having incarcerated themselves in meaningless bonds. She proclaimed, quote, "I am chaos. I am the substance from which your artists and scientists build rhythms. I am the spirit with which your children and clowns laugh in happy anarchy. I am chaos. I am alive, and I tell you that you are free." Malaclips the Younger is quoting supposedly her, this spirit of Eris. At this, Hill and Thornley allegedly fell about laughing and resolved to found the Discordian Society. In keeping with its patron deity's unreliable nature, the Discordian Society has no definition. It was divided into the Paratheo Anamate Mystichood of Eris Esoteric, POEE, which was led by Maltu, and the Arisian Liberation Front, ELF, which was Omar sect. In the 1960s, Hill and Thornley developed their religious identities. Malaclips the Younger, Omar Ravenhurst, and Discordianism gradually took on the lineaments of a modern pagan religion. Although unorganized, a popular motto was "We Discordians shall stick apart," members did form cabals in order to meet, discuss doctrine, and practice the faith. Despite the fact that it lacked a coherent narrative or formal doctrines, the philosophy expounded in Principia Discordia was consistent. Chaos is the true reality. An apparent order, the anaristic principle, and apparent disorder, the eristic principle, are merely mental constructs which humans develop to assist them in coping with reality. Okay, so that's what they believe. Chaos is the true reality. Everything else people say is reality is not. Humanity's miserable existence in the thrall to convention, wage slavery, sexual repression, and myriad other restrictions is the result of the curse of Greyface. And that basically is their name for God, the God of the Bible, Greyface. Because they say Greyface was a malcontented hunchbrain who, according to Discordian mythology, in 1166 BC asserted that the true nature of reality was serious order, and assisted by his followers, stamped out those who believed in play and humor. Modern Discordians are encouraged to consult their pineal glands as a more reliable source of knowledge than either the brain or their heart. All right, so I'm going to stop there. There's a ton more in this paper. We don't have time to go through that. But I just wanted to show you a little bit about the Discordians, what they're all about. Okay, so the point is here that Discordians are all about chaos. They love chaos. They say that's the true nature of reality. And that is what they love to cause. They love to cause chaos. Okay, and we clearly see here from the history that Robert Anton Wilson was involved with that. He was a Discordian. They like causing chaos. They like trolling people. And then we saw that Robert Anton Wilson was, Joseph Mathany's connection to Robert Anton Wilson, the Discordian. And so why that's important is we see that Mathany said he was influenced by Discordians. He's basically a Discordian. And he was using the ARG of Ong's hat as a Discordian tactic to cause chaos in society by willingly deceiving people, tricking them into thinking that this game was real. And it made him laugh. And it was entertaining for him for decades. Okay, from the 80s all the way till 2001, he was, playing along with this thing, fooling people, which is causing chaos, discord. This is a Discordian tactic to troll you, to fool you, to make you fall for disinformation. They laugh when you fall for it. They absolutely laugh. They get a kick out of it, and they think it's the best thing when they can trick you. All right, so we're going to look at a couple more things, and we're going to wrap this up. But what we're going to look at next is another alternate reality game, ARG, that came out to promote the movie AI, a Steven Spielberg movie. And the creator of the game, the game is called The Beast, and the creator of the game wrote this article. And we're just going to quote a couple portions of it to show you something that's pretty interesting about it, a couple things. And you'll see why I'm quoting it. And so let's take a look at it. Alternate reality games, The Beast. At the beginning of 2001, visionary genius and all-around nice guy Jordan Wiseman invited me to be the lead writer on a project designed to generate interest in the world of the upcoming Steven Spielberg movie AI. I didn't know it at the time, but I had just fluked into the chance of a lifetime to get in on the ground floor of what might be the signature art form of the 21st century. Jordan's idea was that we would tell a story that was not bound by communication platform. It would come at you over the web, by email, by fax and phone, and billboard and TV and newspaper, SMS and skywriting and smoke signals too, if we could figure out how. The story would be fundamentally interactive, made of little bits that players like detectives or archaeologists would discover and fit together. We would use political pamphlets, business brochures, answering phone messages, surveillance camera videos, stolen diary pages. In short, instead of telling a story, we would present the evidence of that story and let the players tell it themselves. The very first asset list we ever compiled for the game contained 666 items, so we nicknamed it The Beast. The nickname stuck and has become, for better or worse, more appropriate with the passage of time. Became more appropriate, really. So the number 666 popped up with the project, and they said, oh, the 666, we should call it the beast, meaning the Antichrist, because it has 666 associated with it. That's why they called the game the beast. Okay, admits it right there. And then the next section, he says, slouching toward Redmond to be born. This is of, playing off of that poem of talking about the Antichrist, which that rough beast slouching towards Bethlehem to be born. Talking about the beast again. So he talks about that. And I want you to notice one more thing. Platform independent stories delivery and what pervasive gaming means. He says you can read a book about Harry Potter or Narnia, talking about the Chronicles of Narnia from C.S. Lewis, and ARG allows the player himself to walk through the back of the wardrobe and find Narnia in the real world and use the skills, abilities, and friendship he possesses in the real world to influence what happens to Narnia. Or more exactly, it allows Narnia to come to him. Put another way, an ARG doesn't happen between the covers of a book inside the walls of a cinema or framed by a computer console. An ARG comes at you over the many channels you use to receive and communicate the facts of your daily life. Okay, so it's very important that I point this out because of what he says. It allows Narnia to come to him. It allows the player himself to walk through the wardrobe into Narnia, because in the the Chronicles of Narnia, the C.S. Lewis books, the book specifically The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, they show that these children go through a wardrobe, and it's basically a portal to another dimension, this fantasy world called Narnia. Okay, why is that important? Well, because this directly relates to a teaching I did called Fantasy, the Illusion of Escaping Reality in a Labyrinth of Control. And I show how many, many different stories, not only Narnia, Chronicles of Narnia, but also Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland and many other stories, Never-Ending Story as well. They always show a real world and a fantasy world, and that the children always enter into the fantasy world through some type of portal. Could be the wardrobe, could be through down the rabbit hole, through a mirror, whatever it is. And they're in that false reality, that illusion, that fantasy world, but it actually is controlled. It's also an illusion as well. It's a very important teaching, though, so I highly recommend you go and see that. But it's interesting because he said basically we're bringing Narnia to you. What he's saying is we are making the world Narnia. Instead of sending someone through to that fantasy world, through the book, through the movie, through the whatever it is, we're going to bring it to them. We're going to transform their world into the fantasy world, which is what? Hyper-reality. It's exactly what it is. That's what he's talking about. All right, so you thought all that was crazy, but guess what? Still not crazy enough. So here's the next part. Here's an article from Wired, which is titled, U.S. Spies Want to Play Alternate Reality Games for Work, They Swear. Alternate reality games are no longer just for geeks and corporations that want to sell you stuff. America's intelligence agents now think these interactive games could make a better way to study human behavior. Really? So they're interested in ARGs. Okay. Alternate reality games are no longer just for geeks and corporations that want to sell you stuff. America's intelligence agents now think these interactive games could make for a better way to study human psychology and social behavior. The intelligence community's blue sky researchers, the Intelligence Advanced Research Agency, IARPA, announced they're seeking designers for alternate reality games, or ARGs. It's for work, they swear. The project, which goes by the name You Are Here, may provide capabilities that allow for high-quality, externally valid social, behavioral, and psychological research in real-world contexts, according to a request for information released this week. alternate reality games emerged in the last decade as a form of transmedia storytelling, a practice of using multiple forms of media, particularly the internet, to craft a narrative structure. The directors of an ARG typically start by developing a story, litter clues on the internet, and when the players solve them, the players are led further for clues or stage event featuring live actors. Many ARGs require dozens or hundreds of people to play out, and the games are interactive. Players can shape the course of a story by their actions. Also becomes a means to market products, whether musicians teasing a new album, which Trent Reznor did with 9 Inch Nails. He marketed an album called Year Zero with an ARG. Or a movie studio promoting a new film. We talked about the AI movie. While the ostensible purpose of the game is to research human behavior, the specific intelligence function served here is a mystery. Nor does the agency specify who the players would be. The info request notes that recruiting and screening players will be a challenge, another determining whether an ARG would even work as a research tool, let alone how to design an ARG. And they say one idea, build a game that combines controlled data collection as well as periods of free play and interactions. The agency also makes a quick reference in the request to this Wired article about Conspiracy for Good, an ARG developed by TV show Heroes creator Tim Kring. The game, which played out online and in London in 2010, fused puzzle solving with live events and counted more than 4,000 members assigned to take down a fictional conspiracy. Does that sound familiar? Thousands of people who are part of an ARG. It's a fake game that are assigned to take down a fictional conspiracy. How far IARPA can go depends on whether the agency will get enough funding. And then, well, that's enough of that. But anyways, Pentagon involvement with ARGs. Why do they want to be involved with that? Why? What do you think? What do you think intelligence agencies and Pentagon have an interest in ARGs for? Think it's a good purpose? And then here's another article. I'm not even going to read it, but it's from The Atlantic. And it's called How the CIA Uses Social Media to Track How People Feel. And they see how people feel. They use a bunch of different data points. They go through all over the internet, and they can see how people respond to events in real time. And it's all just, gathering data to see how easy it is to manipulate people. You understand? This is what we're talking about here. All right? One more thing I'm going to show you before we wrap up is this movie called The Game, which came out in 1997. I'm just going to read the very beginning of this. You can go read the plot, and you can see how it directly relates to this message. The Game is a 1997 American mystery thriller film, directed by David Fincher, starring Michael Douglas, Sean Penn, produced by Propaganda Films and Polygram. It tells the story of a wealthy investment banker who was given a mysterious birthday gift by his brother, participation in a game that integrates in strange ways with his everyday life. As the lines between the banker's real life and the game become more uncertain, hints of a larger conspiracy begin to unfold. Basically, they totally mess with him and make this extremely elaborate game. It's like it's an ARG, and everyone surrounding him is in on this it sounds like a prank, this fake, game that they're doing with him. And it gets so out of control, he cannot tell what's real anymore. Ends up like shooting people because he thought they were after him and all this crazy stuff. Point is, it depicts exactly the what they can do with the ARGs, okay? It is a great description of that if you go look at the description of that film, okay? Now, I know we've covered a lot of information, but I'm going to wrap this all up now and try to put it all together for you. So, why did I cover all that information about the ARGs when I started off talking about Nephilim at the Miami Mall? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I want to show you this stuff has been going on for, decades, for a long time. But that there are people out there that, well, first of all, that it's possible to manipulate people into making it so that they lose touch with reality. And it's been studied. They know how to manipulate people to detach them from reality and make them enter into hyperreality. And that this has been used through ARGs and other things. They have a lot of data gathered from studying that. This has been going on for a long time. Many decades. They have gathered data showing how people respond to these things, what works and what doesn't work. So after all this time, I think they've got it down pretty good. And so if they've got all that data from the ARGs, that they use to promote things, and then the Pentagon wants to be involved with that, well, then they could take the same data and they could see how they obviously could manipulate people as well. Very easily. Very, very easily. And then you go back to even all the Discordian influence on that, and now you have a whole other bigger picture as well. Because they enjoy trolling and tricking people. Definitely a sinister undertone, to use that word that lady used. It is sinister, really. This is. But I'm showing you how easy it is to manipulate people. Very, very easy how they could do this. And that is very, very important right now, always has been, but it's going to become even more important as the days go on, the days that we're living in right now. And so I'm going to read you a couple Bible verses here that directly apply to this, and I really want you to think about something and about why this is so important. Why is it so important? Why do we need to talk about, this issue about people being, transported into hyperreality? Because why are they by the way, why are they doing this? What's the big picture? Why would they really want to focus so much time and energy and money on doing this to people? Is there some bigger purpose to all this? Oh, yes. There absolutely is. 2 Peter 1:16 says, "For we have not followed cunningly devised fables." There's cunningly devised fables all around us, which anyone can make up a story, say it's a conspiracy, a cunningly devised fable, and a lot of people would just believe it. They would take it at face value and just believe it, no problem. And this has saturated our world today in social media. Cunningly devised fables spread around everywhere. And now right after this, I'm going to read you another passage which refers to the same subject that we're talking about, but it also tells a prophecy of the times that we're living in right now. So let's look at it. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. "Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come in the future when they will not endure sound doctrine." They don't want the truth anymore. They will not endure the truth from the Bible, sound doctrine. "But after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers, false teachers, having itching ears, telling them what they want to hear. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables." False stories, fables, disinformation. They want the fables. That's what they're going to turn to. Anything except the truth of the Word of God, people will listen to. Some people, they trust the mainstream media. Some don't. But you know what they have? Their alternative media has fables as well. Cunningly devised fables to deceive you, to trick you, to discredit you, to lead you astray. And many of you are falling for it very, very easily. And that's not a good sign. Because if you fall for that now, what are you going to do when it gets more intense? When the deception gets crazier? Because that's what's going to happen. That's part of this prophecy. They will continue to turn away their ears from the truth, and people will continue to turn unto fables. The Bible says, "Evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived." And what is the point of all that? Why is that all happening? Why is there so much emphasis on deceiving everyone and turning them away from the truth? Are they being prepared for something? Yes. They are. The Bible says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that there shall come a falling away first. Apostasia, that's the falling away from the truth. And then that man of sin be revealed. That wicked. The beast. That's what it's preparing for. And to deceive people all over the world, to prepare them for the strong delusion, the worship of the beast. That is exactly what this is all about. At the end of the day, that is what this is about. And if you don't start waking up and testing everything like you're supposed to, including in alternative media and on social media, I don't care how much someone talks about secret societies and satanic pedophile networks, if they are not speaking the truth, they're not speaking the truth. It doesn't matter where it comes from. And they can mix in truth with lies very easily. You have to be careful. You have to test everything. And at the end of the day, the only way you can fully test something is with the objective standard for truth, which is the Word of God. That is the foundation of epistemology, that you cannot know anything for certain unless you have a revelation from a being of infinite intelligence, infinite knowledge, which is God. Because you are a being of finite intelligence, and you don't know what you don't know. And what you don't know might contradict what you think that you know. And so that's why you need the Word of God to test everything that you hear. And I'm going to recommend, link at the end of this video, a teaching that I did called Wild Speculation versus Objective Reality, Finding Truth in the Truth Movement. I mean, that's all about this subject and how people just fall for all this crazy wild speculation with no evidence behind it. People say, oh, I got inside information. They speculate about things about aliens and Nephilim giants at the mall with no video. And everybody just shares it around as if that's true because they love the wild speculation and sensationalism. But they don't want to take the time to skeptically check things and test them. Even if it doesn't matter if it's supposedly being covered up, it goes against the mainstream media. It doesn't matter. You still need to test it. Still need to test it. You cannot just blindly eat that up. Because I'm telling you right now, you're being set up for evil purposes. And then another message I highly recommend you watch related to this subject is called From Love of Sin to the Man of Sin, Why the World Will Wonder After the Beast. Because that's what's going on right now. I explain it. I break it all down for you in that message, how everyone is being prepared with all this deception in order for the man of sin to be revealed, to be out in the open. Worship, because that's the deception. Okay? People are entering into hyper-reality. They don't know what's real and what's not. And that's the perfect place for them to be for the Antichrist. That's absolutely what it is. Okay? And so, and another thing real quick, if you want some additional research, you can go watch this other video, which is highly relevant to this. If you go watch this this channel, this dude, Oki. So the YouTube channel is called Oki's Weird Stories. OKI''S. And the title of the video is How I Infiltrated a Bizarre Conspiracy Cult. And in this video, this guy comes across this community of people that say they were victims of the secret space program. And he basically studies them and understands what they, the different subjects that they talk about. And he makes up a completely fabricated story, gets in contact with the most popular channel that talks about this stuff, gets on his show, tells his fake story, and then the guy puts it on his YouTube channel as if it's a real story, and it got thousands of views. It's a completely fake story. And that just goes to show how people will just believe things with nothing to back it up. No evidence to prove anything. They just trust it. Oh, because why? Because, oh, it's something that's secret. It's something that goes against the government's lied to us. So then it must be telling the truth. No, someone could just make up a story and lie to you. That can also happen. You actually need as much proof as you can. You don't just accept what someone says without testing it. And so guess what? Do you know how dumb that makes you look? Do you know how stupid it makes you look when you fall for the guy that made up a fake story and went on this show and everybody watched it and all the comments are like, wow, amazing, his story's so crazy, blah, blah, blah. And they just fall for it. And then you share that with other people, and then the video comes out where the guy says, yeah, I made the whole thing up. How dumb does that make you look? How much does that destroy your credibility? How much should people never listen to you again? And yet you're not careful and you don't care about that. Then you don't care about a credibility, which means you don't care about a testimony if you claim to be a Christian. So you better be careful, because that's not something to mess around with. Okay? So I think you get the point. Big warning about deception, how everyone's being pushed towards this hyperreality. They're not able to, people, this story about the Nephilim at the mall showed that people are losing touch with reality. They don't even care. They don't even test it. Not saying everyone fell for it, but a lot of people just sharing things with no proof. And they're entering into the Discordian hyperreality. So please be careful and test all things, prove all things with the Word of God. That's what you need. And final note also as well, if you are not a Christian, you are definitely in big danger of being deceived by everything, because you do not have the Spirit of God, which is called the Spirit of Truth in the Word of God. The Spirit of Truth. You cannot be guided to the truth unless you have the Spirit of Truth. And for more on that, I have a message that you need to look up on my channel called Truth in an Age of Confusion. I explain how to be born again, how to become a Christian in that video, and how it starts off with talking about how to determine truth. And so that's very important for you to watch as well. Okay? And that's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. And especially go to the description and subscribe to the Telegram feed, where you get all the PDFs of the notes, uncensored news, and other things. You'll find me there if I get censored on platforms. Thank you for all the prayers and the comments and encouragement and gifts and everything else. God bless you and have a good day.